Today we're talking all about bottle goats, pros and cons of bottle kids compared to dam-raised kids, and I'll be sharing these 5 tips to help you successfully raise your bottle goats. How to pick the right goats, feed the right stuff, feed the right amount, get them on forage, and give them a CDT vaccination. Let's get to it. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. I'm Millie Bradshaw, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. Here we'll talk about raising goats, chickens, and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Before we get started on today's topic, I want to read a review titled Food Independence. Michelle from the Beauty Hunters podcast writes, "This is the perfect podcast for the current times we live in. It is so hard to trust the food supply and know that you can feed your family nutritious foods. Our family is currently building a homestead, and I love that I found Millie." Thanks, Michelle. If you'd like to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, click on the purple words, Write a Review, then give me stars and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you, and you might just hear me share your review on the podcast. All right, kidding season update. Over 80 kids. I'm actually not sure on the exact number today, but this is really exciting because we only have 15 to 20 does left, and we're still in the first heat. That means all of the does that kid before June 24th were bred and settled in their first heat cycle once the buck was put in with them. Anything after June 24th will be second heat. Once we finish kidding, I'll do a whole episode on why this is important. We're still working on the new fence. We will always be working on fence. It's hard to fit our own work in with all the other things happening during the busy summer months. But it'll get finished soon, and in the meantime, my son and I get to have lots of meaningful conversations while we move electric netting almost every day. And that's pretty awesome. We now have 6 bottle kids, soon to be 7, as we had another set of triplets yesterday. So I figured, what better time to talk about bottle babies? When you're looking at getting your first goats, you'll likely run into the option of getting bottle kids. So let's talk about when that's a good idea, when it's not, and some tips that will increase your success with bottle kids. I'm going to focus on goats, but a lot of what I talk about today will apply to lambs and calves, and I'll include some of that for you. All right, the positive side of bottle goats. You will have a friend for life, literally a shadow. Bottle kids worship the ground you walk on and will do anything to be with you. If you're looking for a pet or companion, bottle babies are the way to go. Getting animals or genetics that you otherwise can't afford is another benefit of bottle goats. Many breeders don't have the time to raise bottle kids, so they'll sell them off cheap and let someone else take on the job of raising them. If you can do it successfully, you may earn your way into a goat herd with your time investment rather than a big monetary investment buying mature breeding stock. Now for the negative side of bottle goats. They are a challenge to raise and keep alive and healthy, so you need to understand that death loss can be very high in bottle-raised goats, lambs, and calves. It could go very smoothly, and we hope it does, but there's lots of potential for life lessons. The fact that bottle kids want to be with you all the time makes them harder to fence in than dam-raised kids. Goats are notoriously difficult to fence anyway, but don't even try to put bottle kids behind electric netting. They'll take the shock to get through and be with you, so they need solid fence. They don't herd. This may or may not be an issue for you. It is for us because we have a large group of goats, and having a handful of goats that run at us instead of moving away from us when we try to move pastures is a problem. If all of yours will follow you and you like it that way, this may be an advantage. Because you are their hero, they are not going to respect your space, and as they get bigger, they can hurt you. So you need to try to set some boundaries and teach them to respect your space. Don't let them jump all over you when they're little if you don't want them jumping all over you when they're big. A big word of caution here. Because of this issue, it's very risky to raise a bottle buck kid for breeding stock. When he goes into rut, he could be very dangerous, so I'd strongly advise against that. It's just not worth risking getting yourself or your kids hurt. Let's talk about some tips to help you successfully raise bottle goats. I grew up raising bottle calves each spring. Some years there were a lot more to bottle feed than others, and the success in raising them was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. When we first started raising bottle goats, we did it to get genetics in our show herd that we couldn't afford to purchase. Later on, when we got pretty good at it, we raised bottle kids for another breeder in trade for leasing one of their bucks to breed our show does. So I have 5 tips for you. And the first one is, pick the right goats. Or at least be aware that you're taking on high-risk kids. Triplets and kids that were removed from the doe for another reason are preferable to rejected or abandoned kids. When a doe has triplets, we remove one of the kids and bottle raise it. We didn't always do this. We learned the hard way that range does really struggle to raise 3 kids all the way to weaning. They'll do good for a couple weeks, but as the kids' milk consumption rises and they can't meet their demand, the doe will choose one kid and not let it nurse. That kid will then fail to thrive and potentially die. Rather than risk losing one of the triplets, we just go ahead and take it off, put it on a bottle, and then find it a great home. Can does raise triplets on their own? Yes, they can, if they have enough milk production, and if you pen them by themselves and give them a safe place where they don't lose track of their babies. We have done that before. But what we found is that that is really management intensive and not that great for the kids in the long run. A lot of dairies bottle raise all their kids, so they typically have a very good start, and that's a great place to get a bottle baby with a good beginning. The ones you want to try to avoid are rejected and abandoned kids. They are the highest risk for a poor outcome, mostly because the moms probably rejected them for a reason, and the odds of them having a good start are not great. The other thing you want to make sure is that they got colostrum in the first 24 hours of life. Sometimes you just get what you get and you do your best. Last tip on picking your goats: don't get just one. They are herd animals. They need a companion. At least get 2, if not 3. All right, tip number 2, feed the right stuff. This might be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't feed milk replacer to anything, ever. I'm not going to get any sponsorships over this, but it's a hill I'll die on. I've killed more bottle kids feeding milk replacer in the 1 year we used it than I've had die for any other reason in the 7 years since. So what do you feed instead? The best thing is raw goat milk if you have access. This became so critical in figuring out how to raise these bottle kids that we actually borrowed a dairy doe, and when it worked, I ended up buying dairy does specifically for the purpose of producing milk for bottle kids. We now have 5 dairy does, and during kidding, bottle babies are first priority for their milk. I'll freeze extra milk to have on hand if needed, and I freeze dry all that I can in the off season. The freeze-dried milk stores great and rehydrates easily. If you can't get raw goat milk or raw cow's milk, your next best option is whole milk from the grocery store. It's not as good as raw milk, but it's a huge step above milk replacer. My neighbors run a big herd of beef cattle, and a few years ago, we decided to do an experiment on bottle calves feeding raw goat milk. I had a bunch of extra frozen milk, so they fed it to calves for at least the first few days, and then they switched them over to whole milk. And the health difference was remarkable. The scours that you kind of expect with bottle calves didn't happen. Since then, we've made goat milk a regular part of the bottle calf routine too. Even a few days on raw milk makes a big difference. Add a pinch of baking soda to their first bottle of the day, and for calves, that would be 1/2 to 1 teaspoon. Okay, tip 3, feed the right amount. It's critical that you don't overfeed baby goats. They should still act hungry when they're done with their bottle. This mimics how they naturally suckle a dam throughout the day. Here's how to calculate how much to feed. Take the weight of the goat kid and convert it to ounces. We want to feed 15 to 20% of the kid's weight in fluid ounces per day. Divide the total by the number of feedings per day. Start with 5 or 6 feedings for the first 1 to 2 days, then reduce the number of feedings every few days until you settle on 3 to 4 feedings, whatever works best for you. Once they're doing well and about 6 weeks old, you can drop to 2 feedings per day. For example, let's say we have a 6-pound kid. We're going to multiply that by 16, and that's 96 ounces. 15% of 96 ounces is 14.4. 20% is 19.2. So if we're going to do 4 feedings per day, that will be 3.6 to 4.8 ounces each feeding. I usually just pick a number in the middle, so in this case, I'd probably pick 4 ounces. You need to weigh them regularly, monitor their gain, and adjust the amount. Don't make drastic changes to the amount of milk fed. Make sure all changes are gradual. My favorite bottle is a plastic soda pop bottle with a Pritchard flutter valve nipple. I'll link that in the show notes. I like to mark the amount of milk they are getting on the bottle with a Sharpie, and when the bottle gets gross, throw it away and get a new one. I find that the Pritchards will last through about 1 season and then they need replaced. Make sure you're positioning the kid's head as if it were suckling a dough, as this helps stimulate the esophageal groove, which directs milk to bypass the reticulum, rumen, and omasum to be digested by stomach acid in the abomasum. Tip 4. Get them on forage. In nature, the kids mimic the does, and they will start nibbling on grass or hay at just a few days old. Without the example, they're much slower to get going on forage. I'll put an older kid in the pen with them to teach them to eat hay, and that works really well. Keep forage and water available so that they can have it if they want it. The kids will be much easier to keep healthy once the rumen begins digesting forage. Last tip, 5. Give them a CDT vaccination and booster. As we've shifted to a more natural and less invasive management system, we no longer give routine CDT to everything. However, we still give it to the bottle kids. They are more susceptible to enterotoxemia than the dam raised kids, and we feel like it's a cautionary move to keep them healthy. You need to decide what's best for your herd, and that's what we're doing with ours, and it's working. Here's a quick review of the 5 tips for bottle raising success. 1. Pick the right goats. 2. Feed the right stuff. 3. Feed the right amount. 4. Get them on forage. 5. Give them a CDT vaccination. When you get a goat to bottle raise, you're getting a project for sure. I hope these tips help you successfully raise your first bottle kids into companions, weed eaters, or breeding does. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email, linked in the show notes. And meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.